Welcome back to the second part of Smoke in the Sanctuary. In these discussions, we've been looking into the sanctuary, and specifically in the last half of this presentation, I've shown you how the papacy has manipulated the physical items of the sanctuary. In this half, I'd like to make it more real, closer to home maybe. Do you remember in the presentation entitled The Everlasting Gospel, where we looked at Moses and how Israel moved through the spiritual sanctuary? Well, I want to look at the spiritual sanctuary again, and this time I want to put it into modern context, into modern day context. Do you remember this graphic about the sanctuary and the outer court being the Satan's domain and the inner court being the Lord's domain? From the previous couple of slides, you've been able to identify that Satan's high priest is Dagon, the sun priest, and God's high priest is Jesus Christ. Now, with the movement of Jesus from the most holy outwards towards baptism, when Jesus moved from baptism towards the cross, in the Garden of Gethsemane, as we've discussed, he fell under the power of the sun god Dagon. As you can see, when Jesus was crucified, he was under the power of the sin of this world. Jesus, however, resurrected from the grave, ascended to heaven, and became our high priest in heaven. Something changed, though, after that. 1810 years later, Jesus moved in 1844 into the Most Holy. But have a look at this and you'll see that as he moves, he no longer has jurisdiction over the holy place. If I go back, you'll see that when he moves, his jurisdiction is only of the Most Holy. What does this mean? Well, think about it. Sin cannot be in the presence of God. That was why when Adam and Eve sinned, a cherub, an angel, was put there to separate man from God. We cannot enter into the presence of God if we have sin. So, as Jesus moves, wherever he is what's called present truth. We saw that in the previous presentation. We have something called present truth and all truth. Wherever Jesus is, that is where you will find both present truth and all truth. So as Jesus moves from the holy to the most holy, so the present truth, the jurisdiction of Jesus moves, and the all truth moves from the holy and the most holy into the most holy alone. But that leaves now a gap between Satan's domain and Jesus' domain. Jesus' domain is now in the most holy. Have a look at this. You'll see that there's now a gap, and we understand quite clearly from the psychology of Luciferianism that Satan won't leave it there. Whatever he can steal, he will. And Lucifer, Satan, in the form of his sun priest, moves into the holy place. Now, we've seen that the high priest of Satanism, or high priest of Satan, is the papacy on earth, Dagon, the high priest. Now, Matthew 24:15 told us clearly that when you therefore see the abomination of desolation, other places in the Bible it says the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Please note here that there are multiple levels of symbolism in the Bible. I can't think of a suitable one to use now. It'll come to me just now. But in the Bible, you have multiple levels of fulfillment of prophecy, right? And some are done over long periods of time, some in shorter periods of time. This specific text from Matthew has got a context of not only the time of destruction. Do you remember what happened in Jerusalem in 70 AD? Well, at the time of what Jesus was specifically referring to is when you see the abomination that makes or causes desolation standing in the holy place, let him that readeth understand, and let them flee to the mountains of Judea. What he was referring to is the 70 AD, when the destruction of Jerusalem happened and the Roman powers came in and surrounded Jerusalem. Now, historically, that's what it means, but there's a different level of symbolism as well, because in looking into the sanctuary, you can see these truths being depicted quite clearly. And I want you to look at this text now, specifically in context with the sanctuary message. Let's read it again. When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, the Antichrist, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Now, who else is in the holy place? Can you remember? We looked at it in the previous presentation. Let's have a look again, see if you remember, right? In the holy place, Jesus has moved across to the most holy, but who was in the holy place? Can you remember that it was the Catholic Apostolics and the Anglicans, the Calvinists, the Methodists, Presbyterians, Baptists, Lutherans, Anabaptists, etc.? And I showed you from Revelation 16, verse 13, that the Bible clearly speaks about the false trinity. Read it. I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. Right now, it speaks that these will be the Babylonian influences, the Trinity of Babylon. This will be the 3-part power that influences Christianity. But in the end of the Bible, you've got the 3 angels' messages, which we'll be going to in the next presentation, entitled The Lord Calls 3 Times. But in Revelation 14, verse 8, there's a very, very interesting statement that we need to look at. There followed another angel saying, Babylon, the whore, that woman, that church, is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And this links directly into Revelation 18, where it says, this angel, he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, is fallen. Now listen, that Babylon is become the habitation of devils, the hold of every foul spirit, and, this is an interesting word, the cage of every unclean and hateful bird, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. What does it mean, the cage of every unclean and hateful bird? Well, when Jesus came up out of the water after his baptism, the Holy Spirit descended like a dove, remember? So when it speaks about clean and unclean birds in the Bible, it's referring prophetically to clean and unclean spirits. So this text word says, Babylon has fallen. Babylon, Rome, the papacy, the Vatican, and its influences around the world, that's become the habitation of devils, the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird, every unclean spirit, demons, in other words, the spirits of demons working miracles. Now look at the graphic and tell me, is there anywhere in the sanctuary where you can maybe see a cage? Have a look at the graphic. Think about it. You've got the outer court over here, you've got the laver. Look at this area. Can you see the sort of cage-like structure that would be there? The hold of every unclean bird. What does it mean, behold, Babylon has become the habitation of devils, the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird? Well, I want to take you to this quotation called the end of the 2,000 days. Before I do that, let me just explain something. In the final lecture, I will be giving much more context to this writer.